Hey everyone. Tonight we're diving deep into humanity's most ancient, enigmatic, and utterly mind-bending secrets that lie scattered across our planet. From colossal stone monuments that defy modern engineering capabilities to precision astronomical alignments that shouldn't have been possible for primitive people. From underwater ruins that challenge our entire timeline of civilization to megalithic precision, so perfect it keeps engineers awake at night, wondering how it was achieved. Conventional history tells us that advanced civilization began around 6,000 years ago, yet scattered across our planet are megalithic marvels that whisper of a forgotten chapter in human history. That means there's a whole lost world waiting to be rediscovered, filled with mysteries that would make your understanding of human origins seem like simplistic bedtime stories. So before we journey into these stone labyrinths together, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy exploring forbidden knowledge with me. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what ancient site is closest to your home. It's always fascinating to see who's brave enough to question the established narrative about our distant past. Now dim the lights, maybe grab a warm drink, and let's ease into tonight's exploration of the megalithic enigmas that predate the Great Flood. When you think of ancient civilizations, you might picture Egyptian pyramids, Greek temples, or perhaps Mayan structures nestled in jungle foliage. But tonight, we're going somewhere else entirely. We're going to the places where conventional archaeology falls silent, where academic explanations crumble under scrutiny, and where stone monuments have withstood not only thousands of years, but catastrophic, global floods. These megalithic sites aren't just stone arrangements. They're a three-dimensional puzzle that exists right here on our planet, filled with mathematical precision, so bizarre they look like they were designed by someone with advanced knowledge of astronomy, geology, and physics. Picture this. You're standing before a massive stone wall where blocks weighing hundreds of tons fit together so perfectly you couldn't slide a credit card between them. The structure is earthquake-proof, aligned with celestial bodies, and incorporates mathematical constants that wouldn't be discovered until thousands of years later. And perhaps most perplexing, the technology to move and place such massive stones with such precision doesn't exist even today. These ancient sites don't care about your modern assumptions or your comfort zone. They operate by principles so advanced that even our most sophisticated engineering struggles to explain them. At sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia, stone blocks were cut with such precision that they show evidence of machine tooling, not primitive hand tools. Not just basic cuts, but perfect right angles, symmetrical holes, and uniform surfaces that would challenge modern stone masons equipped with advanced technology. And yet these structures were supposedly built by cultures that, according to mainstream archaeology, hadn't even invented the wheel. Some of these megalithic stones bear the scars of catastrophic flooding, with erosion patterns that speak of submersion and violent water action. Others have been found underwater, in places that haven't been above sea level for over 12,000 years. They've weathered cataclysms that reshaped continents and wiped out entire species. But here's what really keeps alternative archaeologists up at night. We keep finding evidence that contradicts the established timeline, new sites, new dating methods, new astronomical alignments that push human civilization back tens of thousands of years. Every serious investigation brings forth evidence that challenges everything we thought we knew about human history. And for every new discovery, established academics rush to explain it away, often with theories more fantastic than simply admitting our timeline might be wrong. Our ancient past has been keeping secrets for thousands of years, and conventional archaeology isn't eager to give them up easily. It guards its narratives jealously, hidden beneath layers of academic orthodoxy and career-preserving caution. But tonight, we're going to examine the evidence directly and explore some of the most mind-bending, paradigm-shifting, absolutely fascinating megalithic mysteries that have survived from before the Great Flood. Because if you think you know human history, wait until you hear about what's been hiding in plain sight, challenging our understanding of how far back advanced human civilization really goes. And the really unsettling part? We're just beginning to uncover the truth. Let's start our journey in a place that sounds like it came straight out of a forgotten legend, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Located on a remote hilltop in southeastern Turkey, this megalithic site has been carbon dated to around 9,600 BCE, making it nearly 12,000 years old. To put that in perspective, Göbekli Tepe was constructed 7,000 years before the Great Pyramids of Egypt and 6,000 years before Stonehenge. It was built when humans were supposedly primitive hunter-gatherers, not capable of organizing complex construction projects or astronomical knowledge. Göbekli Tepe isn't just old, it's revolutionary. The site features enormous T-shaped pillars arranged in circles, some weighing up to 20 tons, delicately carved with images of animals and abstract symbols. The precision and artistry displayed would be impressive even for a much later civilization, let alone one that existed before the invention of pottery or metallurgy. But here's the truly mind-bending part. After being used for potentially thousands of years, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried, preserved like a time capsule for modern archaeologists to discover. Why would an ancient people invest enormous effort to build such a sophisticated site, only to intentionally bury it? Was it to protect it from something they knew was coming? Something like a catastrophic flood, perhaps? The dating of Göbekli Tepe places its construction right around the end of the last ice age, a period of dramatic climate change, rising sea levels, and according to some researchers, a possible cosmic impact that triggered global flooding. This timeline aligns perfectly with flood myths found in cultures across the world, from the biblical account of Noah to the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, from Native American legends to stories from ancient China. All of these diverse cultures tell essentially the same story, a great flood that nearly wiped out humanity, with only a few survivors to rebuild civilization. For centuries, these stories were dismissed as mere myths, the product of primitive imaginations, trying to explain local flooding events. But what if they were actual historical accounts, passed down through generations, of a global catastrophe that reset human civilization? What if Göbekli Tepe represents the knowledge of a pre-flood civilization, deliberately preserved for those who would come after? The animal carvings at Göbekli Tepe aren't just decorative, they appear to represent star constellations, suggesting an advanced understanding of astronomy. Some researchers have even suggested that they record the cosmic event that may have triggered the Great Flood, a comet impact that is now gaining scientific recognition. Evidence of this impact has been found in the form of a platinum anomaly in the geological record, precisely dated to 12,800 years ago, right when Göbekli Tepe was being constructed. This was the beginning of what scientists call the Younger Dryas period, a sudden return to Ice Age conditions that lasted over 1,000 years and coincides with the extinction of dozens of large mammal species. Was Göbekli Tepe built by survivors of this catastrophe, using knowledge from their advanced pre-flood civilization? Or was it a warning message, carved in stone to survive the ages, telling of celestial cycles that bring periodic destruction to our planet? Either way, it's clear that whoever built Göbekli Tepe possessed knowledge and capabilities far beyond what mainstream archaeology attributes to humans of that time period. And Göbekli Tepe is just the beginning of our journey into megalithic mysteries. Let's travel now to the other side of the world, to a place that has confounded researchers for centuries, the incredible ruins of Sacsayhuaman in Peru. Perched above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, Sacsayhuaman features colossal stone walls built with blocks weighing up to 200 tons. These mammoth stones are fitted together with such precision that not even a piece of paper can be inserted between them. The conventional explanation is that this site was built by the Inca in the 15th century CE, using nothing more than stone hammers, fiber ropes, and manpower. But there's a problem with this narrative. The Inca themselves told Spanish conquistadors that they didn't build Sacsayhuaman. They said it was already ancient when they found it, constructed by an earlier civilization of giants, using technology that could soften stone. Looking at the megalithic precision of these walls, with their perfect interlocking joints and earthquake-resistant design, it's hard to dismiss these accounts as mere legends. Some of these stones have up to 12 angles, fitting perfectly with surrounding blocks in a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle that would challenge modern computer-assisted design. The technology to cut, transport, lift, and fit such massive stones with such precision simply didn't exist in the pre-Columbian era, according to our understanding of their tools and techniques. In fact, it would be extremely challenging, even with modern equipment. And here's where it gets truly intriguing. Geological evidence suggests that Sacsayhuaman may be far older than conventionally believed. The stone walls show signs of extreme weathering that would take many thousands of years to develop in the relatively dry climate of the Peruvian highlands. Some researchers propose that these structures may predate the last ice age, making them over 12,000 years old, contemporaries of Göbekli Tepe, rather than the much later Inca civilization. If true, this would mean that Sacsayhuaman survived the cataclysmic events at the end of the Pleistocene, including massive flooding as ice sheets melted and sea levels rose dramatically. This might explain why many ancient megalithic sites around the world share a common architectural feature. They're built on high ground, as if designed to survive rising waters. Sacsayhuaman isn't an isolated anomaly either. Throughout Peru and Bolivia, we find megalithic structures that exhibit the same impossible precision and massive scale, from Ollantaytambo to Pumapunku. At Pumapunku, part of the Tiwanaku complex in Bolivia, stone blocks weighing up to 800 tons were transported from quarries over 50 miles away, across mountainous terrain and a lake. These blocks feature precision cuts, perfectly straight edges, and drill holes that appear to have been created with machine tools rather than primitive implements. One particularly famous stone at Pumapunku has been called the most precisely cut stone on the planet, a H-shaped block with internal right angles and symmetrical cuts that would be challenging to reproduce even with modern technology. Mainstream archaeology attributes these structures to cultures that existed around 500–1000 CE, but growing evidence suggests they may be much, much older. Beneath the visible ruins of Tiwanaku lie even older structures, buried under sediment layers that would have taken thousands of years to accumulate. In fact, some of these buried structures appear to be aligned with astronomical positions that would only have been correct around 12,000 years ago. This is a pattern we see at megalithic sites worldwide, astronomical alignments that only make sense if the structures were built thousands of years earlier than conventionally believed. Moving now to Egypt, we find perhaps the most famous megalithic structures on Earth, the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx of Giza. The Great Pyramid of Khufu contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, some weighing up to 80 tons, fitted together with sub-millimeter precision. It's aligned to true north with an accuracy of 3/60ths of a degree, a feat that would be challenging even with modern GPS technology. The conventional explanation is that it was built around 2500 BCE as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu, using copper tools, stone hammers, and tens of thousands of workers hauling blocks up ramps. Yet not a single contemporary Egyptian text describes how the pyramids were built, and no definitive evidence of a pharaoh's burial has ever been found inside the Great Pyramid. Instead, what we find at the heart of this massive structure is an empty granite box called the sarcophagus, cut with such precision that it appears to have been crafted with machine tools rather than copper implements. The entire structure incorporates advanced mathematical constants, like pi and the golden ratio, embeds the dimensions of Earth in its proportions, and may even function as a sophisticated machine for generating electromagnetic energy. Hardly the characteristics of a simple tomb. But it's the Great Sphinx that provides perhaps the most compelling evidence for a pre-flood origin of Egyptian civilization. This massive lion-bodied monument shows unmistakable signs of water erosion, vertical fissures, and undulating patterns that could only have been caused by prolonged exposure to heavy rainfall. The problem? The region around Giza has been a desert for at least the past 5,000 years, receiving minimal rainfall, certainly not enough to cause the extensive erosion patterns visible on the Sphinx. Geologist Robert Schoch from Boston University examined these erosion patterns and concluded that the Sphinx must have been carved when the climate in Egypt was much wetter, placing its origin at least 7,000 years ago, and possibly as far back as 10,000 BCE. This conclusion was later supported by other geologists, but remains controversial in Egyptological circles because it would place the creation of the Sphinx thousands of years before the conventional beginning of Egyptian civilization. If the Sphinx was indeed carved around 10,000 BCE, it would mean it witnessed the end of the last ice age and the catastrophic flooding events that accompanied it. In fact, some researchers have proposed that the Sphinx may have been specifically designed as a marker pointing to the constellation Leo at the spring equinox around 10,500 BCE, a date that coincides with the end of the Younger Dryas period and the beginning of our current geological epoch. Could the Sphinx and pyramids be the work of a sophisticated pre-flood civilization, one that possessed advanced knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering techniques that would be lost and only partially recovered by later cultures? Interestingly, Egyptian texts speak of a time called Zep Tepi, or the first time when gods ruled Egypt, before the dynasties of human pharaohs. These texts describe the gods using mysterious technologies and possessing knowledge of the stars that allowed them to align their sacred structures with celestial patterns. Perhaps these weren't gods at all, but the survivors of an advanced pre-flood civilization, their technologies appearing magical to later generations who had lost much of this knowledge. Crossing now to the Mediterranean, we find another enigmatic megalithic site that challenges conventional timelines, the island of Malta and its extraordinary temple complexes. Malta is home to what are considered the oldest freestanding stone structures in the world, temples like Eringintija, Sayar Kim, and the Hypogeum, conventionally dated to between 3,600 and 2,500 BCE. These temples feature massive limestone blocks weighing up to 50 tons, arranged in sophisticated designs that track solstices and other astronomical alignments. The Hypogeum, an underground temple complex, was carved from solid limestone with nothing more than stone tools, according to conventional archaeology. Yet it features perfectly curved walls, sophisticated acoustic properties that amplify sound in specific chambers, and red ochre spiral designs that bear striking similarities to those found at Newgrange in Ireland and other megalithic sites thousands of miles away. But here's where Malta's megalithic mystery deepens. The islands show evidence of having been inhabited as far back as 7,000 BCE, and possibly much earlier. And beneath the waters surrounding Malta, lie what appear to be man-made structures, now submerged, but suggesting human habitation when sea levels were much lower, before the end of the last ice age. Could Malta's temples be the work of survivors from a pre-flood civilization, rebuilding after rising seas consumed much of their original homeland? The islands certainly would have been dramatically affected by the rapid sea level rise that occurred between 12,000 and 7,000 years ago, as the ice sheets melted and ocean waters rose by as much as 400 feet globally. Such a catastrophic change would have permanently flooded vast coastal areas where humans would likely have built their most advanced settlements. Indeed, around the world, we find evidence of submerged structures that hint at advanced civilizations lost beneath the waves. Off the coast of India, in the Gulf of Cambay, marine archaeologists have discovered what appears to be a vast underwater city, with regular structures spanning at least 5 square miles. Artifacts dredged from this site have been carbon dated to around 9,500 years ago, challenging the conventional timeline of Indian civilization. Similar underwater structures have been found off the coast of Japan, near Yonaguni, off the coast of Cuba, and in numerous other locations around the world. Are these the remains of the pre-flood world, now lying beneath hundreds of feet of water, a silent testimony to a civilization erased by rising seas? The distribution of megalithic sites worldwide reveals another intriguing pattern. Many of them appear to be arranged along specific global lines, suggesting a unified system of construction that spanned continents. Researcher Jim Allison has demonstrated that sites like the Great Pyramid, Easter Island, Nazca, Alante Tambo, Paradowari, Tassili, Niger, Siwa, Mohenjo-Daro, Petra, Persepolis, and Angkor Wat all lie on a single great circle around the Earth. The odds of this occurring by chance are virtually zero, suggesting a global civilization with advanced geodetic knowledge was responsible for siting these structures. Similarly, many megalithic sites incorporate the same mathematical ratios and constants in their design. Pi, the golden ratio, and the Fibonacci sequence appear in structures from different continents and supposedly unconnected cultures. These sites also frequently encode advanced astronomical knowledge, tracking not just simple solar alignments, but complex celestial cycles, like the precession of the equinoxes, a 920-year cycle that would take countless generations of precise observation to recognize. How could supposedly primitive cultures without writing systems have tracked such vast time periods? Unless, of course, they inherited this knowledge from an earlier, more advanced civilization. Speaking of inherited knowledge, another compelling piece of evidence for a pre-flood advanced civilization comes from ancient texts and oral traditions around the world. From the Sumerian king list to Plato's account of Atlantis, from Hindu Puranas to Mayan codices, we find consistent references to earlier ages of advanced knowledge that were lost in a great cataclysm. The Sumerian king list, for example, clearly distinguishes between kings who ruled before the flood and those who came after, with the pre-flood kings having impossibly long reigns, perhaps a symbolic way of representing entire dynasties or civilizations. Plato's account of Atlantis, which he claimed came from Egyptian priests, describes an advanced island civilization with technologies beyond those of his time, which was suddenly submerged beneath the waves in a single day and night of misfortune. He specifically dated this catastrophe to 9,000 years before his time, which would place it around 9,600 BCE, remarkably close to the beginning of the Younger Dryas period, and the construction of Göbekli Tepe. Hindu texts speak of previous yugas, or world ages, including the advanced Satya Yuga, which ended in a great flood. These texts describe technology that sounds remarkably like modern inventions, flying machines called vimanas, weapons reminiscent of nuclear bombs, and even something akin to television and telecommunications. Native American traditions from the Hopi to the Maya speak of previous worlds that were destroyed by fire and flood, with only a few survivors carrying knowledge into the New Age. Are all these traditions merely coincidental myths? Or are they the fragmented memories of a real global civilization that was largely destroyed at the end of the last ice age? The conventional view dismisses them as mere stories, yet archaeology continues to push back the dates of human sophistication, with new discoveries consistently showing that our ancestors were more advanced earlier than we previously believed. Let's now examine one of the most precisely engineered megalithic sites on Earth, Baalbek in Lebanon, home to the largest dressed stone blocks ever used in construction. The Temple of Jupiter of Baalbek sits on a platform of massive limestone blocks, including 3 that weigh approximately 800 tons each, known as the Trilithon. Even more massive is the block still lying in the nearby quarry, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighing an estimated 1,000 tons. Conventional archaeology attributes this site to the Romans around 2,000 years ago, but there's a problem with this attribution. The foundation platform, with its massive megaliths, appears to be much older than the Roman temple built upon it, using completely different construction techniques and stone-cutting technology. The Romans themselves wrote that they built their temple on top of a much more ancient foundation, the origin of which was unknown even to them. Modern engineers are baffled by how these enormous blocks could have been quarried, transported, and positioned with such precision using ancient technology. The largest crane in the world today can lift about 1,200 tons under ideal conditions, not in a mountainous region without modern roads. Yet somehow, an ancient civilization managed to move 1,000-ton blocks and position them so precisely that not even a knife blade can fit between them. And Baalbek isn't an isolated case. Around the world, we find megalithic structures built with stones so massive that moving them would challenge our most advanced modern technology. At Coral Castle in Florida, a single man named Edward Leedskalnin somehow moved blocks weighing up to 30 tons by himself in the 1930s, claiming he knew the secret of the pyramids. Witnesses reported seeing these massive stones floating like hydrogen balloons, suggesting Leedskalnin had rediscovered some ancient technology for negating gravity or mass. Though smaller in scale than ancient sites, Coral Castle demonstrates that alternative technologies for moving massive stones may have existed, technologies that have been lost and only partially rediscovered. Similar legends exist in Bolivia, where locals speak of a plant extract that could temporarily soften stone, allowing it to be molded like clay before hardening again. And in Egypt, wall carvings show what appear to be advanced technologies disguised as religious symbols. The Djed pillar resembling an electrical insulator, the Ankh similar to a specialized tool for channeling energy. Could these be representations of actual technologies used by an advanced pre-flood civilization, later interpreted as religious symbols as the technical knowledge behind them was lost? If such technologies existed, they would help explain how megalithic sites around the world achieved their incredible precision and scale. And they would suggest that what we're looking at isn't the product of primitive people with simple tools, but the remnants of a sophisticated civilization that possessed knowledge we are only now beginning to rediscover. Let's shift our focus now to what may be the most mathematically sophisticated ancient structure on Earth, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Despite being allegedly built as a simple tomb, this structure encodes an astonishing array of scientific knowledge in its proportions and alignments. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height multiplied by 2 gives the value of pi 3.14159 to 6 decimal places. The pyramid encodes the exact dimensions of Earth, with its perimeter representing the equator and its height representing the distance from pole to center at a scale of 143,200. The location of the pyramid itself is precisely positioned at the apex of the Nile Delta, at the exact center of Earth's landmass. Its 4 sides are slightly concave, the only pyramid built this way, creating the effect of 8 faces that are only visible from above at the equinox. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy that wasn't matched until the age of modern satellite navigation. Inside, the air shafts from the king's and queen's chambers point to specific stars at specific dates, creating a celestial clock that marked the precession of the equinoxes. The materials used in its construction include granite containing quartz crystal, arranged in ways that suggest the structure may have functioned as a giant energy device, rather than a mere tomb. Indeed, recent studies have shown that the Great Pyramid can concentrate electromagnetic energy in its internal chambers, behaving like a resonant cavity. How could a primitive civilization, without advanced mathematics, without computers, without modern surveying equipment, have created such a precisely engineered structure that encodes universal constants and functions as an energy-focusing device? The conventional explanation that it was built using copper tools and brute force by a society that hadn't even invented the wheel becomes increasingly difficult to accept in light of these discoveries. The evidence instead points to the Great Pyramid being the product of a civilization with scientific knowledge comparable to or exceeding our own, but expressed through different technologies. A civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age, before the great floods that reshaped our planet's coastlines and forced humanity to begin again. This brings us to one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for a pre-flood advanced civilization, underwater structures that could only have been built when sea levels were much lower. Off the coast of Japan, near the island of Yonaguni, lie submerged stone structures, including what appears to be a massive stepped pyramid, terraced agricultural platforms, and roads, all now under 60 to 100 feet of water. Mainstream archaeology is divided on whether these are natural formations or artificial structures, but several key features strongly suggest human creation. These include straight edges, right angles, pillars, and what appear to be drainage channels and stairways carved into the stone. If artificial, these structures must have been created when the area was above sea level, at least 10,000 years ago, during the last ice age. Similar underwater structures have been found off the coast of India and the Gulf of Cambay, where side-scan sonar has revealed a vast underwater city spanning at least 5 square miles. Dredging operations have recovered artifacts including stone tools, pottery fragments, and even human remains, which have been carbon dated to around 7,500 BCE. These findings suggest an advanced urban civilization existed in India thousands of years before the conventionally accepted timeline. Off the coast of Cuba, in the Guanahacabes Gulf, sonar images have revealed what appear to be urban complexes covering an area of 200 square kilometers. The structures lie more than 700 meters deep, suggesting they must have been above water at least 13,000 years ago, when sea levels were significantly lower. And perhaps most intriguing of all, structures resembling pyramids have been discovered beneath the waters of Rock Lake in Wisconsin and Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. The common thread connecting all these underwater discoveries is that they could only have been built before the dramatic sea level rise that occurred at the end of the last ice age. Between 16,000 and 6,000 years ago, sea levels rose approximately 400 feet as the massive ice sheets covering much of North America and Europe melted. This wasn't a gradual process. Geological evidence shows that there were several dramatic pulses of flooding, including one around 11,600 years ago, that may have raised sea levels by 60–80 feet in a matter of weeks. Such a catastrophic event would match perfectly with flood myths from around the world, which consistently describe waters rising rapidly and overwhelming coastal civilizations. These underwater discoveries suggest that the most advanced pre-flood societies may have been located precisely where we would expect them to be, on coastal plains and fertile river valleys that would have been prime real estate during the Ice Age, but are now hundreds of feet underwater. The implications are profound. What if the most sophisticated cities and technologies of this lost civilization now lie beneath the waves, with only their most durable inland structures like pyramids and megalithic temples surviving above water? This would explain why we find these massive stone structures seemingly appearing fully formed, without clear evolutionary precursors. The earlier developmental stages may be underwater. It would also explain why these structures often incorporate advanced astronomical knowledge and engineering techniques that seem beyond the capabilities of the cultures conventionally credited with building them. They weren't the original builders, they were the inheritors, working with fragments of knowledge passed down from the survivors of a global catastrophe. This pattern of survivors rebuilding after a great flood appears consistently in ancient myths and religious texts worldwide. The biblical account of Noah describes not just the flood itself, but the recreation of civilization afterward. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh features Utnapishtim, who survives the deluge and carries knowledge from the pre-flood world. In Greek mythology, Deucalion and Pyrrha repopulate the world after Zeus sends a flood to destroy corrupt humanity. Hindu texts speak of Manu, who builds a ship to survive the Great Deluge and then recreates human society. Similar flood stories appear in cultures from China to the Americas, from Africa to Australia, all featuring a select few who preserve crucial knowledge through the catastrophe. What if these aren't just myths, but distorted historical accounts of actual events? What if an advanced global civilization really was destroyed by catastrophic flooding at the end of the last ice age, with only a few knowledge bearers surviving to rebuild? This would explain the curious phenomenon of megalithic structures appearing worldwide after this period, incorporating similar mathematical principles and astronomical alignments despite being separated by vast distances. It would explain why many ancient cultures share not just flood myths, but similar cosmologies, mathematical systems, and architectural techniques. And it would explain why these cultures consistently refer to gods or advanced beings who taught them agriculture, writing, astronomy, and architecture after the Great Deluge. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for this theory comes from the astronomical alignments encoded in megalithic structures worldwide. Many of these sites appear to be calibrated to celestial positions that would only have been accurate thousands of years before their conventionally accepted construction dates. The Great Sphinx of Egypt, for example, appears to be aligned to face the constellation Leo at the spring equinox around 10,500 BCE, precisely when the Younger Dryas period ended and our current geological epoch began. Numerous other sites worldwide incorporate alignments to the same date, suggesting it held profound significance for their builders. Was this the date of the Great Flood itself? The geological record shows that the end of the Younger Dryas period, around 9,600 BCE, was marked by dramatic climate change and potentially catastrophic flooding as ice dams broke and meltwater surged into the oceans. This date aligns remarkably well with Plato's account of when Atlantis was destroyed, 9,000 years before his time, or approximately 9,600 BCE. It also coincides with the construction of Göbekli Tepe, which appears to record astronomical information relating to a cosmic impact around this time. Growing scientific evidence supports the theory that Earth was indeed struck by fragments of a comet around 12,800 years ago, triggering the Younger Dryas cooling period and potentially causing massive flooding as ice sheets melted or shifted. This impact would have created a global catastrophe. Fires, floods, climate change, and mass extinctions, precisely the kind of event described in ancient flood myths worldwide. The survivors of such a cataclysm would have faced the monumental task of rebuilding civilization from the ruins, preserving crucial knowledge through oral traditions and eventually encoding it in stone monuments designed to withstand future catastrophes. This may explain the curious fact that many megalithic structures appear to serve as astronomical observatories and calendars, tools for predicting celestial cycles that might foretell future cosmic impacts. If your civilization had nearly been wiped out by a comet strike, wouldn't you invest enormous resources in tracking the heavens to prevent it from happening again? The megalithic precision we see at sites like Sacsayhuaman, Baalbek, and the Great Pyramid may represent the survivors' attempts to preserve advanced pre-flood technology and knowledge in the most durable form possible. Massive stone structures built to last for tens of thousands of years. These weren't just monuments or temples, they were time capsules, designed to transmit crucial information to future generations even if the builders' direct descendants perished. This would explain their emphasis on astronomy, mathematics, and geodesy, fundamental knowledge that would be crucial for rebuilding an advanced civilization. It would also explain their global distribution along significant latitude and longitude lines, creating a worldwide network of knowledge centers that could survive localized catastrophes. And it would explain their incredible durability, built not just for their immediate users, but for distant future generations who might need to rediscover lost knowledge. Let's consider another intriguing piece of evidence: the many megalithic sites that show signs of having been abandoned suddenly and catastrophically. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, massive stone blocks lie scattered as if tossed by a giant hand, many showing signs of extreme heat exposure that melted their surface. Similar evidence of catastrophic destruction can be found at sites in Peru, Mexico, and across the Mediterranean. Conventional explanations attribute this to earthquakes or human conflict, but the pattern is consistent with the kind of devastation that would result from cosmic impacts or their aftermath: massive tsunamis, earthquakes, and firestorms. This raises an unsettling possibility. What if the Great Flood wasn't the only catastrophe to strike our planet in prehistoric times? What if there have been multiple cataclysmic events that have repeatedly reset human civilization, forcing us to begin again from the survivors' fragmented knowledge? Ancient texts from India speak of previous world ages, destroyed by fire and flood, with humanity repeatedly rising to great technological heights, only to fall again. Similar cyclical views of history appear in Mayan texts, which describe previous suns or world ages ending in different types of catastrophes. Even Plato, in his dialogue Timaeus, has an Egyptian priest telling Solon, "There have been and will be again. Many destructions of mankind are rising out of many causes. The greatest have been brought about by the agencies of fire and water." The priest goes on to explain that advanced civilizations are periodically destroyed, with only the most uneducated and uncultured surviving in the mountains, leading to humanity having to begin again like children, with no knowledge of what happened in ancient times. This cyclical view of history, advanced civilizations rising, being destroyed by natural catastrophes, and then slowly rebuilding from the ashes, would explain many archaeological anomalies that don't fit neatly into our linear progression model of human development. It would explain out-of-place artifacts, sophisticated technologies appearing in geological strata where they shouldn't exist according to conventional timelines. It would explain why ancient cultures around the world possessed advanced knowledge of precession, a 25,920-year astronomical cycle that would take countless generations of precise observation to recognize without modern instruments. And it would explain why so many megalithic structures incorporate similar mathematical constants and astronomical alignments, despite being built by supposedly unconnected cultures. They weren't unconnected, they were inheritors of the same pre-flood knowledge, preserved by survivors who scattered across the globe after the deluge. Now let's examine one of the most enigmatic megalithic mysteries: the evidence of advanced machining and cutting technologies in ancient stoneworks. At sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia, the Egyptian pyramids, and various temples in Peru and Mexico, we find stone blocks with perfectly straight cuts, uniform drill holes, and complex interlocking joints that would challenge even modern stone cutting technology. Conventional archaeology insists these were created using simple copper tools, stone hammers, and abrasives like sand. But experimental archaeologists attempting to replicate these cuts using ancient tools have consistently failed to achieve the same precision and finish. The evidence instead points to the use of advanced cutting technologies, possibly sonic drilling, high-speed diamond-tip tools, or other techniques we haven't yet rediscovered. At the Serapim of Saqqara in Egypt, enormous granite boxes weighing up to 100 tons were carved with perfect right angles and smooth surfaces that show evidence of machine tooling rather than handwork. Similar precision appears in the core drilling samples left by ancient Egyptian builders, which show spiral striations with a consistent pitch that could only have been produced by machine drilling at a constant rate. Christopher Dunn, an engineer who has studied these artifacts extensively, has concluded that they show clear evidence of having been created with technologies at least as advanced as our own, if not more so. The implications are profound. What if the megalithic structures we've been examining aren't the achievements of a primitive civilization using simple tools, but the remnants of an advanced technological society that approached stoneworking from a completely different angle than we do today? What if they possess technologies based on principles we haven't yet discovered or rediscovered? This would explain the seemingly impossible precision and scale of these ancient works, as well as the consistent mathematical and astronomical knowledge embedded within them. It would also explain why many ancient texts describe their ancestors possessing miraculous technologies, from the Vimanas flying machines in Hindu texts to the magical powers attributed to Egyptian priests. These weren't supernatural abilities, but advanced technologies that later generations, having lost the scientific knowledge behind them, could only describe as magical. And perhaps most intriguingly, it would explain why these megalithic structures often incorporate acoustic and electromagnetic properties that we're only beginning to understand. Many ancient chambers and passageways create unusual acoustic effects, amplifying certain frequencies while dampening others, creating standing waves or transmitting sound over unusual distances. Some megalithic sites, like those incorporating quartz-bearing granite, appear designed to channel and possibly generate electromagnetic energy. Recent studies have shown that certain ancient structures, including the Great Pyramid, can concentrate electromagnetic waves in their internal chambers, functioning as resonant cavities in ways that seem unlikely to be accidental. Were these structures designed not just as monuments or religious sites, but as functional technologies whose purposes we've forgotten? Were they energy generation devices, communication systems, or technologies operating on principles we've yet to rediscover? The conventional view dismisses such possibilities as fantasy, yet we continue to discover that many ancient myths contained accurate scientific knowledge, from the blue lotus containing phosphodiesterase inhibitors, as Egyptian texts claimed, to Amazonian tribes, knowing which plants to combine to create ayahuasca despite having no understanding of biochemistry. What other ancient knowledge might we be dismissing as mere mythology or religious symbolism? Let's now consider the global pattern of megalithic construction that emerged after the proposed Great Flood around 9600 BCE. Following this date, we see a curious phenomenon: sophisticated stone structures appearing simultaneously across multiple continents, incorporating similar design principles despite having no apparent contact with each other. In Malta, massive temple complexes began to be constructed around 3600 BCE. In Britain and Ireland, stone circles and passage tombs like Stonehenge and Newgrange appeared around the same period. In Egypt, the first pyramids were supposedly built around 2700 BCE, though evidence suggests the Sphinx and potentially the Great Pyramid are much older. In Central and South America, advanced stone structures began appearing, culminating in the incredible precision of sites like Sacsayhuaman and Pumapunku. Across the Pacific, on remote Easter Island, massive Moai statues were erected using techniques that still baffle researchers. And in Cambodia, the vast temple complex of Angkor Wat was built incorporating precise astronomical alignments and mathematical constants found in structures thousands of miles away. Conventional archaeology attributes these similarities to coincidence or argues that humans naturally develop similar solutions to similar problems. But the precision of the mathematical constants and astronomical alignments encoded in these structures suggests something more: a common source of advanced knowledge. What if these weren't independent developments, but the result of survivors from a pre-flood civilization distributing themselves around the world after the deluge, carrying their knowledge with them? This would explain why these megalithic traditions often appear fully formed, without clear evolutionary precursors in their regions. It would explain why they incorporate similar mathematical principles and astronomical knowledge despite being separated by vast oceans. And it would explain why many of these cultures share strikingly similar origin myths, tales of culture-bearing gods or heroes who arrived after a great catastrophe and taught them the arts of civilization. From Viracocha in South America to Osiris in Egypt, from Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica to the seven sages of Mesopotamia, all these traditions speak of advanced beings who brought knowledge of astronomy, agriculture, writing, and architecture after a great deluge. Were these gods actually survivors from an advanced pre-flood civilization perceived as divine by the primitive peoples they encountered? Did they deliberately establish these megalithic traditions around the world as a way of preserving and transmitting their knowledge through the ages? The evidence increasingly suggests that this may indeed be the case, that what we're looking at isn't the independent development of stoneworking cultures, but the deliberate establishment of knowledge centers by the inheritors of a lost global civilization. This brings us to perhaps the most profound implication of the megalithic evidence, the possibility that we are not the first advanced civilization to exist on Earth. The conventional narrative tells us that human history is a story of linear progress, from primitive hunter-gatherers to agricultural societies to industrial civilization, and now our modern technological age. But what if this narrative is incomplete? What if advanced civilizations have risen and fallen multiple times in Earth's past, their achievements largely erased by natural catastrophes and the passage of time? What if we are merely the most recent iteration in a cycle that has repeated itself throughout human history? The evidence we've examined, from precisely engineered megalithic structures to advanced astronomical knowledge encoded in ancient monuments, from underwater ruins to mathematical constants embedded in structures worldwide, suggests that this may indeed be the case. Our civilization may not be the pinnacle of human achievement, but merely the latest chapter in a much longer story of advancement, catastrophe, and rebuilding. This perspective challenges not just our understanding of history, but our very conception of ourselves and our place in time. It suggests that our current technological achievements may be rediscoveries rather than unprecedented innovations. It implies that ancient peoples may have possessed knowledge and capabilities that we have yet to recover or understand. And perhaps most humbling of all, it reminds us that our civilization, like those that came before, remains vulnerable to cosmic and geological forces beyond our control. The megalithic structures we've explored tonight may represent more than just impressive architectural achievements. They may be messages from our ancestors, warnings about cycles of catastrophe, and repositories of knowledge designed to help rebuild after disaster. They stand as silent sentinels across our planet, their massive stones weathered by thousands of years, yet still maintaining their precise alignments and mathematical proportions. They have survived floods, earthquakes, wars, and the passage of civilizations, carrying their encoded knowledge through the ages. And now, as we develop the scientific tools to properly understand them, they are beginning to speak to us again, revealing secrets about our past and perhaps warnings about our future. The ancient megalithic structures built before the Great Flood aren't just historical curiosities or tourist attractions. They are the keys to understanding our true history, a history far older, far more advanced, and far more cyclical than conventional archaeology has acknowledged. They challenge us to expand our conception of what our ancestors were capable of, and to reconsider the conventional timeline of human civilization. They invite us to imagine a world before the flood, a world of advanced knowledge, sophisticated technology, and global connection. A world whose achievements we may still be struggling to match, even with all our modern tools and understanding. And perhaps most importantly, they remind us that catastrophe can strike at any time, resetting the clock of civilization and forcing survivors to begin again with only fragments of previous knowledge. This perspective gives new meaning to these ancient megalithic sites. They aren't just monuments or temples, but time capsules designed to preserve crucial knowledge through cataclysm. Their massive scale and precise astronomical alignments weren't meant to impress contemporaries, but to ensure they would survive long enough to transmit their encoded information to future civilizations. Their global distribution wasn't random, but a deliberate strategy to ensure that even if some were destroyed, others would remain to carry the message. And that message is becoming increasingly clear as we develop the scientific tools to properly decode it. We are not the first, we are not alone in time, and the cycle will continue. So the next time you see images of the Great Pyramid, or Stonehenge, or Sacsayhuaman, remember that you're not just looking at impressive stone monuments. You're looking at the legacy of a lost world, a civilization that existed before the Great Flood and left these massive structures as their testament. Their stone sentinels have watched civilizations rise and fall, have endured catastrophes that erased almost all other evidence of their existence, and have patiently waited for humanity to regain the knowledge needed to understand them. Now, as we begin to decode their mathematical and astronomical secrets, they are finally speaking to us again across the millennia. And their message is both humbling and inspiring. We are part of a much longer human story than we've realized. Heirs to knowledge and achievements far older than conventional history acknowledges. As we face our own uncertain future, with climate change and other potential catastrophes looming on the horizon, perhaps we should pay more attention to these stone messages from our ancestors. They survived the end of their world and found ways to preserve crucial knowledge for those who would come after. They built not just for their time, but for all time, creating enduring monuments that could survive flood, fire, and the collapse of civilizations. In their massive stones and precise alignments, they encoded the wisdom needed to rebuild after catastrophe, astronomical knowledge, mathematical principles, geodetic information, and perhaps technologies we have yet to rediscover. They did this not out of vanity, but out of a profound sense of responsibility to future generations, to us, their distant descendants, who might one day need this knowledge to survive our own world-ending cataclysm. As we stand at the threshold of potentially civilization-altering challenges, from climate change to asteroid impacts, to self-created threats like nuclear war, perhaps we should look to these ancient builders for inspiration. How can we preserve our knowledge and achievements in forms that might survive catastrophe? What wisdom would we most want to transmit to survivors, should our civilization fall? And what can we learn from these ancient megalithic structures about resilience, long-term thinking, and the preservation of knowledge through time? These are the questions that the stone sentinels of our ancient past invite us to consider, questions that may prove crucial as we navigate our own uncertain future. So the next time you encounter images or information about these incredible megalithic sites, look beyond their surface impressions. Try to see them not as primitive attempts at architecture or religious monuments, but as sophisticated knowledge transmission devices created by people who understood cycles of catastrophe and rebirth. People who had witnessed the near-total destruction of their world in the Great Flood and were determined that crucial knowledge would survive, even if their civilization did not. In their massive stones and precise alignments, they left us both a warning and a gift, a warning about the cyclical nature of catastrophe, and a gift of the knowledge needed to rebuild afterward. After thousands of years, their message is finally being heard again, as we develop the scientific tools and interdisciplinary approaches needed to properly understand it. And what we're discovering challenges everything we thought we knew about human history, pushing back the timeline of advanced civilization by thousands of years and suggesting that our ancestors possess knowledge and capabilities far beyond what conventional archaeology has acknowledged. This isn't just an academic question about the past. It has profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our future. If advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before, it means ours can fall too. If ancient peoples encoded sophisticated knowledge in stone monuments, it suggests we might need similar long-term thinking about knowledge preservation. And if the conventional timeline of human civilization is wrong by thousands of years, what other aspects of our understanding might need revision? These are the questions that the megalithic structures built before the Great Flood invite us to explore, questions that may prove essential as we navigate our own uncertain future. So take a moment to consider these ancient stone sentinels, these messages from a lost world. Look beyond conventional explanations and allow yourself to wonder, what if they represent not the beginning of human achievement, but the remnants of a much older chapter in our story? What if the Great Flood really did happen, wiping out an advanced global civilization and forcing humanity to begin again? And what if the megalithic structures we've explored tonight are the legacy of that lost world, encoded messages waiting for us to finally understand them? The evidence increasingly suggests that this may indeed be the case, that our understanding of human history needs radical revision, and that these ancient stones have far more to tell us than we've realized. They stand as silent witnesses to a forgotten chapter of human achievement, waiting for us to develop the knowledge needed to hear their message. And as we begin to decode their secrets, they are revealing a past far more advanced, far more sophisticated, and far more relevant to our future than we ever imagined. The megalithic structures built before the Great Flood aren't just historical curiosities. They are the keys to understanding who we really are, where we come from, and perhaps where we're heading. They challenge us to expand our conception of human achievement and to recognize that we may be part of a much longer cycle of advancement and catastrophe than conventional history acknowledges. They invite us to look beyond the limitations of current archaeological thinking and to consider the evidence with fresh eyes and open minds. And they remind us that the true history of human civilization may be far older, far more advanced, and far more cyclical than we've been taught. So the next time you encounter images or information about these incredible megalithic sites, remember that you're not just looking at impressive stone monuments. You're looking at the legacy of a lost world, a civilization that existed before the Great Flood and left these massive structures as their testament. Their stone sentinels have watched civilizations rise and fall, have endured catastrophes that erased almost all other evidence of their existence, and have patiently waited for humanity to regain the knowledge needed to understand them. Now, as we begin to decode their mathematical and astronomical secrets, they are finally speaking to us again across the millennia. And their message is both humbling and inspiring. We are part of a much longer human story than we've realized, heirs to knowledge and achievements far older than conventional history acknowledges. As we face our own uncertain future, with climate change and other potential catastrophes looming on the horizon, perhaps we should pay more attention to these stone messages from our ancestors. They survived the end of their world and found ways to preserve crucial knowledge for those who would come after. They built not just for their time, but for all time, creating enduring monuments that could survive flood, fire, and the collapse of civilizations. In their massive stones and precise alignments, they encoded the wisdom needed to rebuild after catastrophe, astronomical knowledge, mathematical principles, geodetic information, and perhaps technologies we have yet to rediscover. They did this not out of vanity, but out of a profound sense of responsibility to future generations, to us, their distant descendants, who might one day need this knowledge to survive our own world-ending cataclysm. As we stand at the threshold of potentially civilization-altering challenges, from climate change to asteroid impacts to self-created threats like nuclear war, perhaps we should look to these ancient builders for inspiration. How can we preserve our knowledge and achievements in forms that might survive catastrophe? What wisdom would we most want to transmit to survivors, should our civilization fall? And what can we learn from these ancient megalithic structures about resilience, long-term thinking, and the preservation of knowledge through time? These are the questions that the stone sentinels of our ancient past invite us to consider, questions that may prove crucial as we navigate our own uncertain future. So the next time you encounter images or information about these incredible megalithic sites, look beyond their surface impressions. Try to see them not as primitive attempts at architecture or religious monuments, but as sophisticated knowledge transmission devices created by people who understood cycles of catastrophe and rebirth. People who had witnessed the near-total destruction of their world in the Great Flood and were determined that crucial knowledge would survive, even if their civilization did not. In their massive stones and precise alignments, they left us both a warning and a gift. A warning about the cyclical nature of catastrophe, and a gift of the knowledge needed to rebuild afterward. After thousands of years, their message is finally being heard again, as we develop the scientific tools and interdisciplinary approaches needed to properly understand it. And what we're discovering challenges everything we thought we knew about human history, pushing back the timeline of advanced civilization by thousands of years, and suggesting that our ancestors possessed knowledge and capabilities far beyond what conventional archaeology has acknowledged. This isn't just an academic question about the past, it has profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our future. If advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before, it means ours can fall too. If ancient peoples encoded sophisticated knowledge in stone monuments, it suggests we might need similar long-term thinking about knowledge preservation. And if the conventional timeline of human civilization is wrong by thousands of years, what other aspects of our understanding might need revision? These are the questions that the megalithic structures built before the Great Flood invite us to explore, questions that may prove essential as we navigate our own uncertain future. So take a moment to consider these ancient stone sentinels, these messages from a lost world. Look beyond conventional explanations and allow yourself to wonder, what if they represent not the beginning of human achievement, but the remnants of a much older chapter in our story? What if the Great Flood really did happen, wiping out an advanced global civilization and forcing humanity to begin again? And what if the megalithic structures we've explored tonight are the legacy of that lost world, encoded messages waiting for us to finally understand them? The evidence increasingly suggests that this may indeed be the case, that our understanding of human history needs radical revision, and that these ancient stones have far more to tell us than we've realized. They stand as silent witnesses to a forgotten chapter of human achievement, waiting for us to develop the knowledge needed to hear their message. And as we begin to decode their secrets, they are revealing a past far more advanced, far more sophisticated, and far more relevant to our future than we ever imagined. The megalithic structures built before the Great Flood aren't just historical curiosities. They are the keys to understanding who we really are, where we come from, and perhaps where we're heading. They challenge us to expand our conception of human achievement and to recognize that we may be part of a much longer cycle of advancement and catastrophe than conventional history acknowledges. They invite us to look beyond the limitations of current archaeological thinking and to consider the evidence with fresh eyes and open minds. And they remind us that the true history of human civilization may be far older, far more advanced, and far more cyclical than we've been taught. As we continue our exploration of these ancient enigmas, let's now turn our attention to one of the most puzzling aspects of megalithic structures, their inexplicable connections across vast distances. Researchers have discovered that many megalithic sites around the world appear to be built on a precise global grid system, suggesting a level of global coordination that shouldn't have been possible for supposedly primitive and isolated cultures. This grid system appears to be centered on the Great Pyramid of Giza, with major megalithic sites positioned at specific geometric intervals around the globe. When mapped precisely, sites like Angkor Wat in Cambodia, Easter Island in the Pacific, Nazca in Peru, Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan, and Stonehenge in England all appear to fall on this global grid. The odds of this occurring by random chance are astronomically small, suggesting deliberate placement by builders with advanced geodetic knowledge. Even more intriguing is the fact that many of these sites are positioned at intervals that correspond to mathematical constants like pi and phi, as well as reflecting specific angular relationships to star systems. This global pattern suggests not just isolated cultures building impressive monuments, but a worldwide effort to create what some researchers have called a planetary grid system. But what purpose would such a system serve? Some researchers propose that these megalithic sites might have functioned as a global network of energy generators, possibly harnessing Earth's natural electromagnetic field or other forces we're only beginning to understand. Others suggest they served as astronomical observatories designed to track celestial cycles with extreme precision, possibly to predict cosmic events that could threaten Earth. And still others propose that they functioned as communication nodes, using principles of acoustic and electromagnetic resonance to transmit information across vast distances. Whatever their purpose, the existence of this global pattern challenges our entire conception of ancient peoples as isolated and primitive. It suggests, instead, a worldwide civilization with advanced knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and geodesy, knowledge that allowed them to precisely position massive stone structures across the entire planet. This global civilization appears to have existed before the end of the last ice age, when sea levels were much lower and land bridges connected continents that are now separated by water. The rising seas at the end of the Ice Age would have not only flooded coastal settlements, but cut off land connections between continents, isolating populations that had previously been part of a connected global network. This could explain why megalithic building techniques appear to have declined over time rather than advanced. The survivors were working with fragments of knowledge from a more advanced parent civilization, gradually losing technical skills and mathematical understanding with each generation. The evidence for this lost global civilization isn't limited to megalithic structures. It appears in other forms of ancient knowledge as well. Ancient mathematical systems, from cultures as diverse as the Maya, Egyptians, and Babylonians, share curious similarities, including advanced understanding of concepts like zero, place value, and astronomical cycles. Ancient medical knowledge shows surprising sophistication, with evidence of complex surgical procedures being performed thousands of years ago in locations from Peru to Egypt to India. And ancient maps appear to show geographical features that shouldn't have been known to their creators, including the coastline of Antarctica without ice, which hasn't been visible for at least 12,000 years. The famous Eerie map, compiled in 1513 from much older source maps, shows Antarctica, with remarkable accuracy decades before the continent was officially discovered. Even more incredibly, it appears to show the coastline without ice, a feature that hasn't been visible since the end of the last ice age, and couldn't have been mapped with technology available in the 1500s. Similar anomalies appear in other ancient maps, suggesting they were copied from much older originals created by a civilization with advanced surveying capabilities. These maps, along with megalithic structures and other archaeological anomalies, paint a picture of a sophisticated pre-flood world that was largely destroyed when sea levels rose dramatically at the end of the last ice age. The survivors of this catastrophe would have faced the monumental task of preserving their knowledge and rebuilding civilization with severely limited resources and fragmented information. Is it any wonder that the most durable form of knowledge preservation they could devise was massive stone structures aligned to astronomical positions? These would survive even if written records were lost, even if oral traditions became corrupted, even if technologies were forgotten. The stones themselves, with their precise alignments and encoded mathematical relationships, would preserve the essential knowledge needed to rebuild advanced civilization. And they have survived, standing silently for thousands of years, weathering floods, earthquakes, wars, and the rise and fall of countless later civilizations. Only now, with our modern scientific capabilities, are we beginning to decode their message and understand their significance. Only now are we recognizing that they aren't primitive attempts at architecture or simple religious monuments, but sophisticated knowledge preservation devices created by a civilization that understood cycles of catastrophe and rebirth. Consider the curious case of Nabta Playa in southern Egypt, a stone circle that predates Stonehenge by at least 2,000 years. Carbon dating places its construction around 7,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest known astronomical observatories on Earth. The stones are aligned to track various celestial bodies, including the summer solstice sunrise and the movements of specific stars like Sirius, Dubia, and Alpha Centauri. But what's truly remarkable is that these alignments would only have been accurate around 6000 BCE. The date matches the carbon dating precisely. This suggests that whoever built Nabta Playa possessed not only the knowledge to create an accurate astronomical observatory, but the understanding that such alignments shift over time due to the precession of the equinoxes. They weren't building for immediate practical purposes alone, but creating a calendar set to a specific moment in time, perhaps recording when a celestial alignment occurred that had special significance. Similar astronomical time markers appear at megalithic sites worldwide, often pointing to dates around 10,500 BCE, the end of the Younger Dryas period, and the beginning of our current geological epoch. Was this the date of the Great Flood itself? Did the builders of these structures want to ensure that future generations would remember this catastrophic event and the celestial conditions that accompanied it? The global distribution of these sites suggests a coordinated effort to preserve this knowledge, spreading it across multiple continents to ensure it would survive even if some regions were devastated by future catastrophes. This brings us to another fascinating aspect of megalithic structures, their remarkable resilience in the face of natural disasters. Many of these sites have survived thousands of years of earthquakes, floods, and other catastrophes that have destroyed countless more recent structures. The megalithic walls at Sacsayhuaman, for example, have weathered numerous powerful earthquakes that devastated more modern buildings in Cusco. The Great Pyramid has maintained its structural integrity for thousands of years, despite being in a seismically active region. And many megalithic sites incorporate sophisticated engineering techniques specifically designed to withstand earthquakes, interlocking blocks, wider bases than tops, and specific angles that distribute seismic forces. This earthquake-resistant design appears consistently in megalithic structures worldwide, from Peru to Egypt to Japan, suggesting their builders possessed advanced understanding of seismic forces and how to counteract them. But why would ancient builders invest so much effort in making structures that could survive catastrophic events? Unless, of course, they had already experienced such catastrophes and understood the importance of creating knowledge repositories that could endure them. If your civilization had nearly been wiped out by a global cataclysm, wouldn't you want to ensure that your most important knowledge survived any future disasters? Wouldn't you encode that knowledge in the most durable form possible, massive stone structures built to last for tens of thousands of years? And wouldn't you distribute these knowledge repositories around the world to ensure that even if some were destroyed, others would survive to transmit their message to future generations? This perspective gives new meaning to the curious global pattern of megalithic construction that emerged after the proposed Great Flood around 9,600 BCE. It wasn't random independent development, but a deliberate strategy for knowledge preservation implemented by survivors of a global catastrophe. Let's now examine one of the most mysterious aspects of megalithic structures, their acoustic properties. Many ancient stone chambers and passageways create unusual sound effects, amplifying certain frequencies while dampening others, creating standing waves, or transmitting sound over unusual distances. The King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, for example, appears designed to resonate at specific frequencies, amplifying sounds within a certain range while canceling out others. Similar acoustic properties appear in megalithic chambers worldwide, from Malta's Hypogeum to Newgrange in Ireland. These acoustic effects aren't random. They consistently focus on specific frequencies, particularly those in the range of 95 to 120 Hz, which research has shown can induce altered states of consciousness and affect human brain activity. Some researchers propose that these chambers were designed as acoustic technology, devices for inducing specific mental states, healing through sound vibration, or even communicating across great distances. Recent experiments have demonstrated that certain megalithic chambers can amplify sounds by up to 30 decibels, functioning effectively as stone amplifiers built thousands of years before electronic amplification was invented. Other chambers appear designed to create infrasound, frequencies below the range of human hearing, that can nevertheless affect the body and mind in profound ways. These sophisticated acoustic properties challenge our conception of ancient peoples as primitive and suggest instead a civilization with advanced understanding of the physics of sound and its effects on human consciousness. Similarly, many megalithic structures incorporate materials and designs that interact with electromagnetic energy in unusual ways. The granite used in Egyptian pyramids and other megalithic structures contains high quantities of quartz crystal, which has piezoelectric properties. It generates electrical charges when under pressure or vibration. The layered limestone and granite construction of the Great Pyramid creates what electrical engineers would recognize as a capacitor, a device for storing electrical charge. And the shafts within the pyramid appear positioned to channel electromagnetic energy into the internal chambers, creating zones of intensified energy. Recent scientific studies have confirmed that the Great Pyramid can concentrate electromagnetic energy in its chambers and focus radio waves in its immediate vicinity. Similarly, many stone circles appear to alter the electromagnetic field in their vicinity, creating measurable changes that peak at specific times, corresponding to astronomical alignments. Were these structures designed as energy devices, harnessing natural electromagnetic and acoustic forces for purposes we're only beginning to understand? The evidence increasingly suggests that this may indeed be the case, that megalithic structures weren't just monuments or religious sites, but functional technologies whose purposes we've forgotten. This technological interpretation of megalithic sites finds support in ancient texts and traditions worldwide. Egyptian hieroglyphs depict what appear to be electrical devices disguised as religious symbols, the digit pillar resembling an electrical insulator, the ink, similar to a specialized tool for channeling energy. Ancient Indian texts describe devices called mandalas that could generate and direct energy, as well as vimanas that could fly through the air. Similar accounts of advanced technologies appear in ancient texts from Mesopotamia, China, and pre-Columbian America, all describing devices and capabilities that shouldn't have existed according to conventional timelines. Are these merely myths and religious symbolism? Or are they fragmented memories of technologies possessed by an advanced pre-flood civilization, later interpreted through a religious lens as their scientific principles were forgotten? The megalithic evidence suggests the latter, that these ancient texts may contain more historical truth than we've acknowledged, describing actual technologies from a lost advanced civilization in the only terms available to later generations. This interpretation challenges our entire conception of human history and technological development. It suggests that advanced knowledge hasn't developed in a linear progression from primitive to sophisticated, but in a cyclical pattern of advancement, catastrophe, and rebuilding. It implies that our modern technological achievements may be rediscoveries rather than unprecedented innovations. And it suggests that ancient peoples may have approached technology from completely different first principles than we do today, developing solutions based on natural energies and materials rather than fossil fuels and electronics. What if they developed advanced technologies that worked with, rather than against, natural systems? Technologies that harness the Earth's electromagnetic field, solar energy, acoustic properties of materials, and other natural forces in ways we're only beginning to explore. This would explain why their technological achievements look so different from ours. They weren't primitive approximations of modern technology, but sophisticated applications of different technological principles altogether. The megalithic structures they left behind may represent not just knowledge repositories, but functional devices built according to these alternative technological principles. Devices designed to work with Earth's natural energy systems, rather than requiring external power sources. Devices built to last for tens of thousands of years, rather than becoming obsolete in decades. Devices encoding multiple levels of functionality, from astronomical observatories to energy generators to acoustic chambers, in single integrated structures. This integrated, multifunctional approach to technology stands in stark contrast to our modern tendency toward specialization and planned obsolescence. It represents a fundamentally different relationship with time and resources, building for millennia rather than years, designing for sustainability rather than disposability. Perhaps this is the most important lesson these ancient structures have to teach us, not just about our past, but about our future. As we face growing environmental challenges and resource limitations, perhaps we need to reconsider the technological path we've taken. Perhaps these ancient builders, with their focus on durability, astronomical cycles, and working with natural energies, have wisdom to offer our society as we confront the limitations of our current technological paradigm. This brings us back to the profound implications of the megalithic evidence, the possibility that we are not the first advanced civilization to exist on Earth, and that our current path of development may be leading us toward the same fate that befell our predecessors. The ancient megalithic structures scattered across our planet aren't just historical curiosities or impressive architectural achievements. They are warnings from the past about cycles of catastrophe, testaments to the resilience of human knowledge in the face of disaster, and possibly templates for more sustainable approaches to technology and civilization. They challenge us to expand our conception of what's possible, to recognize that our ancestors may have possessed knowledge and capabilities that we have yet to recover or understand. And they remind us that civilizations, like individuals, are mortal, that no matter how advanced we become, we remain vulnerable to cosmic and geological forces beyond our control. This perspective isn't just academic, it has profound implications for how we approach our present challenges and plan for our future. If advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before, what can we learn from their fate to avoid repeating it? If ancient peoples developed technologies based on different principles than ours, what alternative approaches might we explore to address our current environmental and energy challenges? And if they invested enormous resources in preserving knowledge for future generations, shouldn't we be doing the same? These are the questions that the megalithic structures built before the Great Flood invite us to explore, questions that may prove essential as we navigate our own uncertain future. So the next time you encounter images or information about these incredible ancient sites, look beyond conventional explanations. Allow yourself to wonder, What if they represent not the beginning of human achievement, but the remnants of a much older chapter in our story? What if the Great Flood really did happen, wiping out an advanced global civilization and forcing humanity to begin again? And what if the megalithic structures we've explored tonight are the legacy of that lost world, encoded messages waiting for us to finally understand them? The evidence increasingly suggests that this may indeed be the case, that our understanding of human history needs radical revision, and that these ancient stones have far more to tell us than we've realized. They stand as silent witnesses to a forgotten chapter of human achievement, waiting for us to develop the knowledge needed to hear their message. And as we begin to decode their secrets, they are revealing a past far more advanced, far more sophisticated, and far more relevant to our future than we ever imagined. Now let's examine another aspect of megalithic structures that has baffled researchers: their curious relationship with electromagnetism and earth energies. Many megalithic sites appear to be positioned on what traditional cultures called ley lines or dragon paths, invisible channels of energy that flow across the Earth's surface. Modern scientific investigation has revealed that many of these ancient sacred sites do indeed show unusual electromagnetic properties, fluctuations in the local magnetic field, higher concentrations of negative ions, and abnormal radiation readings. Interestingly, many megalithic sites are located at points where the Earth's magnetic field shows local anomalies, or where underground water flows create natural electrical currents. The massive stones used in these structures often contain high concentrations of quartz crystal or magnetite materials with unique electromagnetic properties. Quartz crystal exhibits what scientists call the piezoelectric effect. It generates a small electrical charge when subjected to pressure or vibration. Magnetite, as its name suggests, is naturally magnetic and responds to the Earth's magnetic field. By incorporating these materials into their structures, ancient builders created monuments that interact with natural electromagnetic energies in ways we're only beginning to understand. Some researchers propose that megalithic sites functioned as a kind of ancient technology, devices for collecting, concentrating, and directing Earth's natural electromagnetic energy. This interpretation finds curious support in ancient texts and traditions worldwide, which consistently describe special powers associated with sacred sites and stone monuments. From the manna of Polynesian tradition to the vril of European legends, from the qi of Chinese medicine to the prana of Hindu teachings, cultures worldwide describe invisible energies that can be channeled and directed through specific materials and structures. Were these merely spiritual concepts, or were they describing actual physical phenomena that ancient peoples had learned to work with through their megalithic technologies? The scientific evidence increasingly suggests the latter, that many ancient sacred sites do indeed show measurable electromagnetic anomalies that could affect human consciousness and physiology. Research has demonstrated that certain electromagnetic frequencies can induce altered states of consciousness, affect memory and learning, and even promote healing. The frequencies most often measured at megalithic sites fall precisely within these biologically active ranges, particularly the 7.8 Hz Schumann resonance that matches human brainwaves in meditative states. Could ancient builders have created structures specifically designed to amplify and direct these frequencies for ceremonial, healing, or technological purposes? The evidence suggests they did exactly that, creating a global network of sites that function as a kind of planetary energy grid. This perspective gives new meaning to the curious global distribution of megalithic sites and their precise geometric relationships to each other. They weren't randomly placed, but positioned at specific points on Earth's surface, where natural energies could be most effectively harnessed and directed. Some researchers have gone further, proposing that certain megalithic structures may have functioned as wireless power transmission systems, similar to those envisioned by Nikola Tesla in the early 20th century. Tesla believed it was possible to transmit electrical energy without wires by using the Earth itself as a conductor and creating standing waves in Earth's electromagnetic field. He began building a global power transmission tower at Wardenclyffe, Long Island, before his funding was cut and the project abandoned. Curiously, the mathematical principles behind Tesla's wireless energy transmission appear encoded in the proportions and placements of many megalithic structures, particularly pyramids. The Great Pyramid's dimensions, materials, and internal chambers create a resonant structure that concentrates electromagnetic energy, exactly what would be needed for a wireless power transmission or reception device. Similar properties appear in pyramids and megalithic structures worldwide, from Bosnia to China, from Mexico to Indonesia. Were these structures part of a global energy network created by an advanced pre-flood civilization? A network designed to harness and distribute free energy from Earth's natural electromagnetic field. If so, it would represent a technological approach radically different from our own fossil fuel and nuclear-based energy systems, one working with rather than against natural planetary systems. This interpretation aligns with another curious aspect of megalithic structures, their apparent relationship with water. Many megalithic sites include sophisticated water management systems, from the complex hydraulics of Angkor Wat to the precise channels at Tiwanaku. These systems often incorporate vortex patterns and flow dynamics that modern hydrologists have discovered create structured water with unusual properties. Water passing through these ancient systems becomes energized, showing changes in molecular clustering, surface tension, and electrical conductivity. Similar principles are now being rediscovered by modern researchers investigating structured water for agricultural and healing applications. Were ancient builders aware of these properties thousands of years ago? Do they deliberately incorporate water systems into their megalithic structures to harness these energetic effects? The evidence suggests they did, creating integrated systems that combine stone, water, and electromagnetic energy in ways that enhanced all three elements. This integrated approach to working with natural energies represents a technological paradigm very different from our own, one based on enhancing rather than exploiting natural systems. It suggests that ancient builders possess not just advanced engineering capabilities, but a profound understanding of how natural energies interact and can be harmoniously directed. This perspective challenges not just our understanding of ancient capabilities, but our entire conception of what advanced technology means. Perhaps true technological advancement isn't measured by domination of nature, but by harmonious integration with natural systems. Perhaps the most sophisticated technologies aren't those that consume the most resources, but those that achieve the greatest effects with the minimal intervention. By these measures, the megalithic technologies of our ancient ancestors may have been far more advanced than our own, achieving effects through subtle manipulation of natural energies that we can only accomplish through brute force approaches, consuming vast resources. This may be the most important lesson these ancient structures have to teach us, not just about our past, but about potential paths for our technological future. As we face growing environmental challenges and resource limitations, perhaps we need to reconsider these ancient approaches to working with rather than against natural systems. Perhaps the stone sentinels left by our ancestors aren't just records of the past, but guideposts to a more sustainable future. Let's now examine another aspect of megalithic structures that challenges conventional timelines, their apparent recording of astronomical events that occurred thousands of years before their supposed construction. Many megalithic sites incorporate alignments and proportions that reference astronomical configurations from 10,500 to 9,600 BCE, the period marking the end of the Younger Dryas and the beginning of our current geological epoch. This period coincides with geological evidence for massive flooding as ice sheets melted rapidly, raising global sea levels by hundreds of feet and inundating coastal areas worldwide. It also coincides with Plato's date for the destruction of Atlantis and the timeline given by the ancient Egyptians for the beginning of their civilization after a great catastrophe. Why would structures supposedly built thousands of years later encode astronomical information from this specific period? Unless, of course, this period held special significance for their builders, perhaps marking the date of the Great Flood itself. This suggests that megalithic structures weren't just built to serve immediate practical purposes, but to preserve the memory of a world-changing catastrophe for future generations. They were cosmic timekeepers, designed to record the celestial conditions that accompanied a global disaster that nearly wiped out human civilization. This interpretation finds support in the curious fact that many megalithic sites appear designed to function as disaster calendars, tracking long-term celestial cycles associated with periodic catastrophes. The precession of the equinoxes, a 25,920-year cycle caused by Earth's wobble on its axis, appears encoded in megalithic sites worldwide, from the proportions of the Great Pyramid to the layout of Angkor Wat. Recent research has suggested that this precessional cycle may correlate with periods of increased comet and asteroid impacts on Earth, as our solar system moves through different regions of the galaxy. Did ancient builders understand this relationship between celestial cycles and periodic catastrophes? Were they creating structures specifically designed to track these cycles and warn future generations when the next danger period was approaching? The evidence suggests they were doing exactly that, encoding sophisticated astronomical knowledge in stone monuments that would survive for tens of thousands of years. Knowledge that would allow future civilizations to predict and potentially avoid the fate that had befallen their ancestors. This perspective gives new meaning to the obsession with astronomical precision found in megalithic structures worldwide. They weren't just calendars for planting crops or scheduling religious festivals. They were warning systems designed to track celestial cycles associated with global catastrophes. And they were knowledge repositories, preserving the scientific understandings of an advanced civilization in durable form that could survive the very disasters they were designed to predict. This interpretation finds curious support in ancient myths and religious texts worldwide, which consistently describe cyclical catastrophes linked to celestial events. From the Hindu concept of yugas to the Mayan long count calendar, from the Norse Ragnarok to the biblical flood, cultures worldwide preserve memories of periodic world-ending disasters triggered by events in the heavens. Modern science is beginning to confirm aspects of these ancient accounts, with growing evidence for cosmic impacts, solar flares, and other celestial events that have indeed caused global catastrophes throughout Earth's history. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, for example, proposes that Earth was struck by fragments of a comet around 12,800 years ago, triggering the last ice age and potentially causing massive flooding as ice sheets melted or shifted. Evidence for this impact has been found in geological samples worldwide in the form of platinum anomalies, nanodiamonds, and other markers consistent with a cosmic impact. This date aligns remarkably well with flood myths worldwide, and with the astronomical alignments encoded in megalithic structures. Were these structures built by survivors of this catastrophe, determined to warn future generations about celestial cycles that bring periodic destruction to our planet? The evidence increasingly suggests this may indeed be the case, that megalithic structures represent a sophisticated warning system created by an advanced civilization that had experienced a global cataclysm and wanted to prevent future disasters. This interpretation challenges our entire conception of ancient peoples as primitive and superstitious. It suggests instead that they possessed advanced scientific knowledge and technological capabilities, which they used to create durable systems for tracking celestial dangers and preserving essential knowledge through catastrophes. It implies that the astronomical and mathematical knowledge encoded in megalithic structures wasn't primitive approximation, but sophisticated science expressed through different technologies than we use today. And it suggests that ancient myths and religious texts may contain more historical truth than we've acknowledged, preserving memories of real catastrophes and the advanced civilizations they destroyed. This perspective gives new meaning to the curious fact that many ancient cultures describe gods or advanced beings who taught them agriculture, writing, astronomy, and architecture after a great deluge. From Oannes in Mesopotamia to Viracocha in South America, from Osiris in Egypt to Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica, these culture bearers are consistently described as survivors from an advanced civilization destroyed by a global flood. Were these gods actually survivors from an advanced pre-flood civilization, perceived as divine by the primitive peoples they encountered? Did they deliberately establish megalithic traditions around the world as a way of preserving and transmitting their knowledge through the ages? The megalithic evidence suggests this may indeed be the case, that what we're looking at isn't the independent development of stoneworking cultures, but the deliberate establishment of knowledge centers by the inheritors of a lost global civilization. This interpretation challenges not just our understanding of history, but our very conception of ourselves and our place in time. It suggests that our current technological achievements may be rediscoveries rather than unprecedented innovations. It implies that ancient peoples may have possessed knowledge and capabilities that we have yet to recover or understand. And perhaps most humbling of all, it reminds us that our civilization, like those that came before, remains vulnerable to cosmic and geological forces beyond our control. The megalithic structures we've explored tonight may represent more than just impressive architectural achievements. They may be messages from our ancestors, warnings about cycles of catastrophe, and repositories of knowledge designed to help rebuild after disaster. They stand as silent sentinels across our planet, their massive stones weathered by thousands of years, yet still maintaining their precise alignments and mathematical proportions. They have survived floods, earthquakes, wars, and the passage of civilizations, carrying their encoded knowledge through the ages. And now, as we develop the scientific tools to properly understand them, they are beginning to speak to us again, revealing secrets about our past and perhaps warnings about our future. The ancient megalithic structures built before the Great Flood aren't just historical curiosities or tourist attractions. They are the keys to understanding our true history, a history far older, far more advanced, and far more cyclical than conventional archaeology has acknowledged. They challenge us to expand our conception of what our ancestors were capable of and to reconsider the conventional timeline of human civilization. They invite us to imagine a world before the flood, a world of advanced knowledge, sophisticated technology, and global connection. A world whose achievements we may still be struggling to match, even with all our modern tools and understanding. And perhaps most importantly, they remind us that catastrophe can strike at any time, resetting the clock of civilization and forcing survivors to begin again with only fragments of previous knowledge. This perspective gives new meaning to these ancient megalithic sites. They aren't just monuments or temples, but time capsules designed to preserve crucial knowledge through cataclysm. Their massive scale and precise astronomical alignments weren't meant to impress contemporaries, but to ensure they would survive long enough to transmit their encoded information to future civilizations. Their global distribution wasn't random, but a deliberate strategy to ensure that even if some were destroyed, others would remain to carry the message. And that message is becoming increasingly clear as we develop the scientific tools to properly decode it. We are not the first, we are not alone in time, and the cycle will continue. So the next time you see images of the Great Pyramid, or Stonehenge, or Sacsayhuaman, remember that you're not just looking at impressive stone monuments. You're looking at the legacy of a lost world, a civilization that existed before the Great Flood and left these massive structures as their testament. Their stone sentinels have watched civilizations rise and fall, have endured catastrophes that erased almost all other evidence of their existence, and have patiently waited for humanity to regain the knowledge needed to understand them. Now, as we begin to decode their mathematical and astronomical secrets, they are finally speaking to us again across the millennia. And their message is both humbling and inspiring. We are part of a much longer human story than we've realized. Heirs to knowledge and achievements far older than conventional history acknowledges. As we face our own uncertain future, with climate change and other potential catastrophes looming on the horizon, perhaps we should pay more attention to these stone messages from our ancestors. They survived the end of their world and found ways to preserve crucial knowledge for those who would come after. They built not just for their time, but for all time, creating enduring monuments that could survive flood, fire, and the collapse of civilizations. In their massive stones and precise alignments, they encoded the wisdom needed to rebuild after catastrophe. Astronomical knowledge, mathematical principles, geodetic information, and perhaps technologies we have yet to rediscover. They did this not out of vanity, but out of a profound sense of responsibility to future generations. To us, their distant descendants, who might one day need this knowledge to survive our own world-ending cataclysm. As we stand at the threshold of potentially civilization-altering challenges, from climate change to asteroid impacts to self-created threats like nuclear war, perhaps we should look to these ancient builders for inspiration. How can we preserve our knowledge and achievements in forms that might survive catastrophe? What wisdom would we most want to transmit to survivors should our civilization fall? And what can we learn from these ancient megalithic structures about resilience, long-term thinking, and the preservation of knowledge through time? These are the questions that the stone sentinels of our ancient past invite us to consider, questions that may prove crucial as we navigate our own uncertain future. If you've enjoyed this journey into our forgotten past, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video with others who might be interested in these mysteries. Your support helps make these explorations possible and spreads awareness about these important archaeological enigmas. And let me know in the comments which megalithic site you find most intriguing, or if you have questions about any of the evidence we've discussed. This is just the beginning of our journey into the true history of human civilization, and I look forward to exploring more ancient mysteries with you in future videos. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, the truth about our past may be far more extraordinary than we've been led to believe.